Let me paint you a picture. You're sitting at your desk, completely stuck. Maybe it's a work problem, a leaking pipe, a form you don't understand, or an emotional weight you've been carrying for weeks. And somewhere nearby, there's a person who could help you in 60 seconds flat. But you don't ask. Instead, you spend 2 hours figuring it out yourself, slightly miserable, slightly proud, and completely unwilling to say 3 simple words. Can you help? Sound familiar? Because if it does, you're not alone. And more importantly, you're not just being stubborn. There's something much deeper going on inside that brain of yours. And today we're going to get into all of it. Here's what most people assume about those who never ask for help. They think it's ego. They think it's arrogance. Like somehow these people believe they're above needing anyone. But the psychological reality is almost the complete opposite. More often than not, people who struggle to ask for help aren't doing it because they think too highly of themselves. They're doing it because somewhere deep down, they don't think highly enough. Let's go back to the beginning. Psychologists have long studied a concept called self-reliance. And on the surface, it sounds like a virtue. And it is to a point. But there's a version of self-reliance that quietly crosses a line, where it stops being a strength and starts becoming a wall. Researchers call this compulsive self-reliance, a pattern often rooted in early attachment experiences. In other words, what happened to you as a kid? Think about it this way. If you grew up in an environment where asking for help was met with frustration, dismissal, or simply silence, your brain learned something. It learned that needing people is risky, that depending on others leads to disappointment. So your brain, being the remarkably adaptive organ that it is, made a deal with you. It said, fine, we'll just do everything ourselves. And for a while, that deal kept you safe. The problem is, you're probably still honoring that deal long after the danger has passed. This is where the psychology gets really interesting. There's a concept in behavioral science called the helper's high. Studies have shown that when people help others, they experience a genuine neurological reward. It actually feels good to help someone. So here's the strange irony. When you refuse to ask for help, you're not just denying your self-support. You're also quietly denying the people around you the chance to feel that connection, that satisfaction, that warmth of being useful to someone they care about. Your independence, as well-intentioned as it is, can sometimes read as distance. But let's talk about another layer, because this one tends to hit a little harder. A lot of people who never ask for help are secretly terrified of something very specific. Not failure, not judgment exactly, but vulnerability. Asking for help requires you to say out loud, I don't have this handled. And for certain personality types, those words feel almost physically painful. There's a particular kind of person, often high-achieving, often quietly anxious, who has built their entire identity around competence, around being the one who figures things out, the one who holds it together, the one others lean on. To ask for help would feel like a crack in the foundation of who they believe themselves to be. Sound like anyone you know? Maybe even someone reading this right now? Here's what the research actually tells us, though. A landmark study out of Harvard found that people dramatically underestimate how willing others are to help them. We assume asking will burden people, annoy them, make us look weak. But the data shows the opposite. People are far more likely to say yes than we expect, and they often feel more connected to us after helping, not less. We've been carrying this weight based on a fear that was never quite accurate to begin with. There's also something to be said about what chronic self-sufficiency does to us over time. It's exhausting, not in a dramatic, obvious way, but in that slow, grinding kind of tired that builds up quietly. When you're always the one managing everything, solving everything, carrying everything, you eventually start to feel isolated even when you're surrounded by people. Because connection isn't just about being around others. It's about letting others in. And asking for help, even in small ways, is one of the most honest forms of that. So what do you do with all of this? Well, start small. You don't need to suddenly pour your heart out or hand over your problems to the nearest willing stranger. But maybe the next time you're stuck, instead of spending hours in frustrated silence, you let one person in. Just one. One small ask. And pay attention to what happens, not just to the problem, but to how it feels between you and that person afterward. Because here's the reframe I want to leave you with. Asking for help isn't a confession of weakness. It's an act of trust. And trust, real trust, is one of the rarest and most powerful things one human being can offer another. The people who ask for help aren't falling apart. They're the ones quietly building something the lone wolves often miss. Real, lasting, unguarded connection. So the next time you catch yourself white-knuckling through something alone, just stop for a second and ask yourself, what am I actually protecting here? Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't figuring it out on your own. Sometimes it's just saying the words,